Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. I've talked a lot about the topic of magic in general, a lot on this channel. It is called the Wizard Factory after all, but this will be the first time really doing an actual deep dive into this topic and really getting into the fundamentals of what it is and how you can actually begin to practice. And I can think of no one better to get into this amazing topic with than my friend Thomas Sheridan, who's a brilliant mind and incredibly well-versed, not only intellectually, but in practice himself. So I'm super excited about this one. I really hope you all enjoy it. Let's get into it. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Wizard Factory podcast, where together we explore the universe through ourselves. Today is a very special episode. I'm joined again by my good friend Thomas Sheridan. We've had him before on the show, and we're going to be getting into the topic of magic. For those unfamiliar, Thomas is a occult researcher, a historian, content creator, musician, and pagan. So Thomas, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you back, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Logan. Great talking to you, and I'm delighted to be here.
Absolutely. So last time was a bit of a general discussion. We got into a good many things. If anyone has not watched that episode, I do recommend going back, and I'll put that link in the description. But I'd like to start off by just letting you, Thomas, kind of introduce yourself.
Well, I'm from Ireland, and I've traveled extensively, worked extensively. I've had a kind of an interesting life. I left home quite young and basically traveled the world with a guitar. Ended up in New York for a long time. Ended up going back to school there, continuing my education there in corporate communications and graphic design. And I've worked in the corporate field for a while when I needed to make some money, got out of it. Was involved in music and kind of underground scene in Manhattan. Came back to Ireland, kind of continued a similar thing for a while, and then dropped out of kind of society completely. And then I wrote a book called Puzzling People in 2010, which surprisingly gave me a life. It sold quite well, and I've been kind of able to get by enough since then to actually devote my life to what I want to do rather than be stuck in the matrix. So I've been fortunate in that sense. I'm not rich or anything, but I've actually my objectives I've achieved, put it that way, and modestly.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've been following your work for quite some time. I love the diversity of the topics that you get into, whatever it is. You go deep and you know your stuff. You're very well read and everything like that. But today we're going to be specifically getting into the concept of magic, a holistic deep dive into this topic, which it's long overdue on this channel. And I'm very excited. So I think a good place to start, as we typically do, is with definitions. So, the viewers have heard my take on this, but I would love to hear, how would you define magic?
Magic is the ability to hack the operating software of this universe in order to create change based on one's will. It is a surprisingly powerful experience. It's reality, but it can begin with something as simple as artwork. It can be rooted in everything from the art of writing to the art of speech to the visual arts, but it provides a means to make reality optional, and you can modify your engagement with the five sense reality. That's how I would put it.
That's fantastic. I love that. That brings up quite a few different things and ways we could get into. What stood out to me first was you mentioned it could be art, it could be writing. I'd say it's something that really taps into the creativity of the individual. as with the principle of mentalism, everything has to start in the mind and be aligned then with the will of that person. And then whatever that medium is ends up being kind of the way of executing. So like even if you're just going to make a list of things you want to do in the day, it starts with your intention and what you want to do, and then just the simple act of writing that down, that's the first step of materializing that in the physical world.
Absolutely. I mean, this could be anything from, say, a designer designing a piece of furniture or a machine or something that only exists in his consciousness. It does not exist anywhere else. It's purely a phantasm within their, cognitive processing. And by means of the actual, it is an art and it is a science. There's
Hmm.
some are better at that than others because it's an art, but it's a science because it requires a process. And the process is the artist there, the designer, taking up a pen and paper, making an outline sketch, and perhaps developing it further in a CAD program. Next thing you know, he's working with people or using his own tools, and this thing that only existed in a vision in his mind is now fully materialized in the universe. That's about as potent a description of magic as you'll ever get. That's basically Magic 101, to take something that it didn't exist on this material plane. Now, people, it goes from everything else, the conjurations, the spells, hexes, whatever you want to call them. But ultimately, that's what it is: the removal of something from consciousness, from the cognitive aspects of one's personality, mind, intellect, and to bring it to life in the material world.
Right. Yeah. And as you said, it's an art and a science. So I would I would imagine that those who have are gifted in both worlds will probably be the best at it, because it's kind of like coming at from the left brain or the right brain, and maybe some people are a little bit more like nuts and bolts kind of scientific approach to it, and others are just purely from the creative. But I would imagine if you can really tap into both and combine that into your craft, that would produce the most powerful results.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you so many scientists from maybe not so much these days, but engineers and stuff would definitely tell you that I've met them. That's are very like people working at high levels of engineering and things like that, and they would say that they constantly had these things they could thought were impossibilities, and yet by a process of concentration and the desire to make it happen. This is the important part. Desire is the real, you know, transfer system of producing a stream of psychic energy. It's the whole thing that if you really want something, but you take the actual steps towards it, you will find, and your desire and your will is rooted in a genuine sense of bringing this into reality. The universe will push it 10 steps towards you. It's remarkable, but you don't even have to call it magic. You could call it like, intention or whatever, manifesting, but it absolutely does. And the key feature is the sense of, I don't know, what would you call it? Honorable desire? Would you call it? It's a desire born out of genuine uh, longing. I put it that way. And that's the most powerful form of creating the stream of energy. If you have a pure heart towards this intention, you will find it much more
Hmm.
attainable.
Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting. Again, definitely got my mind going here, but and we'll get into
Yeah.
the ethical aspect of this in just a moment. But I guess it's like you're saying that if a person is more in alignment with the higher will, not the egoic or selfish will, but like the higher force of creation, and you're kind of like acting through your purpose, your orlog, that's going to
Yeah.
have a better effect for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very influenced by Hinduism and this concept of actual following your dharma.
Right.
And, you could say it's the higher self, but sometimes it is based in the ego. Or suppose you want your band to be successful, or you want to be an actor, you want to be successful in sport or something. Well, there is an element of egotism there, but you can see it in like incredible sports people like Muhammad Ali. There's that ego was an essential part of the manifestation of his desire.
Mm.
So again, it's purity of thought. Like if you want to be successful at something just for money and chicks, and to look down on people and say screw you, and look at me, it won't happen. It just won't happen. Not, if you do become famous, it won't be through your will. Your will. It was, you just got lucky. But if you say, like, I really want to be successful because I really believe in my music, or I really believe in I really believe I have something to help people here with this kind of thing. Now that changes everything, because that clears a lot of the inhibitors out of the way. And you suddenly find there's a direct line, the stream of psychic energy works much better. Because when you really think about it, if you're doing it out of insecurity, you're really doing it out of fear. But if you're doing it out of love, and I hate to say it in that way, but it's like, it is true what Crowley
Mm.
said, love is the law. I mean, if you do it out of love, I don't just necessarily mean romantic love. I mean, like, in terms of following your dharma. That's probably a better way to put it. You will find that the results will manifest much more effectively. The possibility of attainment is remarkably enhanced.
Right. So it's not that the two have to be mutually exclusive as far as the ego and the dharma. It's really more of a blend of it. But you're saying it's about like the purity of your intention and where that is coming from.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a very powerful factor in it. This is why it tends to. You can talk in terms of ethics, but if it's solely motivated for your selfishness alone, if you are driven by selfish needs, if you're driven by a need to impose yourself upon a situation, you're really diving into the world of black magic here. You're messing with someone else's will. That's not a good thing. It often has very good success in the early stages, but then falls apart. If you're approaching in terms of your dharma, you will definitely have much more success in terms of attaining what your desire is through your will.
Right.
Like you said, you use the word purity. That's really what, I guess that's a good word, but I'd say that there's something about when you're in your dharma, and you apply focus to that you don't even have a kind of a sense of desire. It just kind of happens. It's very strange. It's almost like you're somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the will is kind of moving through you in a way.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good way to put it. I'd agree with that.
Yeah, it's a great kind of introduction to the foundation, I think there, and I would love to get into kind of what got you on your journey in terms of practicing, learning about this. Was this something that kind of started at an intellectual level through like reading books and things, and then you started to try it out, or kind of the other way around?
Well, I was a kind of a strange kid. I was very intellectual at a very young age, even though I didn't come from that kind of background. I grew up in a kind of a tough inner city area, but something happened. I was kind of like very interested in reading I could read from a very early age. Before I even started kindergarten, I basically had a good sense of being able to read and write. And it just happened by mistake. I just don't know. So I was reading quite like heavy books at a very young age. I'm talking about like 8, 9, 10. And a lot. What I used to love was Dennis Wheatley's novels on magic and witchcraft and black magic. They were books of they're fictional stories, but the way he wrote was just so tantalizing to me. It sounded like, even at a young age, and that he knew this stuff was real. He wasn't just talking about, you know, what's the word, fiction. There was some reality to it. Because so I stumbled upon a book when I was about 10 or 11 by a British author called David Conway, called Magick, a Primer. And it was at the same time too I was developing a strong interest in astronomy, And for some reason, it seemed to sit well with my mind at the time. So anyway, I was about 11, I think, and I was being very badly bullied in school by this kid. And so I basically hexed him. And following, what I'd learned about magic through some books by that point, next day he didn't come back to school, and he had basically what I was told. He had broken both his legs,
Wow.
and I didn't have to deal with him ever again. But it frightened me. It wasn't a pleasant experience. I was very frightened by the experience because I was too young. I felt like I'd done something wicked, and I felt like I'd done something bad, even though he was a little shit and deserved it probably, and worse. He'd have broken my legs if he could have done it. But I just felt frightened by it, and I felt like I was dealing with dark forces. And I wasn't raised in a religious family or anything like that, but I just was instinctually saying, "Oh, I've done some." It's almost like I was. I was only, I was a kid who shoplifted something from a store and was waiting for the police to knock at the door. That kind of thing. I wasn't meant to be like a shoplifter. I wasn't meant to be doing magic. That's how I felt. And so I never did anything on it for years and years and years. And until I was in my late teens, and I discovered the chaos magic scene in England. And this really blew my mind. The fact that magic had gone from David Conway's book I read as a kid, which was very, a sort of a genteel country Englishman's view of like sorcery, to this thing that was rooted in punk rock and science fiction and all kinds of other things. Now, I'd had supernatural and magical experiences in the period in between, but I didn't actively seek them out. They happened by accident, some incredible things. And I was also developing my interest in paganism and going around Ireland looking at ancient sites and that kind of thing. So that was keeping me happy, and I had this strong sense of supernaturalism in me, but not towards magic until I heard about the chaos magic scene through a fanzine that I'd come across. And suddenly this concept of that magic could be just like music. You could have a punk rock version of magic, and that was chaos. And it was rooted in things like everything from, the emerging world of gaming back then to, music, to films, to literature. Everything could be used to invoke reality. So, like I remember I came across a very early essay. I don't know who it was about, but this guy basically had showed that like a lot of what H.P. Lovecraft had written had come true. So he was either a magician and the guy said he wasn't, but he said that his intensity of writing was so powerful that he actually created things and they happened in reality. And I also heard this about a book later by an American researcher called John Keel, and he wrote the Mothman Prophecies, and he spoke about a literary people involved in literary things where they actually created like shadow people of literary characters that existed in the building that he was in, and they lasted for years later, just by the sheer intensity of his writing. So that set me off on a whole other place that continues to me to this day. That I don't really like ceremonial magic, and I think there's a strong Abrahamic element to ceremonial magic. Now, if people are into it, that's their own business. I don't care. I mean, I've actually, I've known people in the Golden Dawn here. The Golden Dawn in Dublin, where I grew up, was a very big magical order, very powerful, and right in like to the top of government and everything. It wasn't hidden or anything. But I didn't like the ceremonial nature of it. I didn't like this Victorian parlor room games. I felt they were playing this heavy emphasis on theory. It didn't interest me, and so I'd say if I was anything, I'm probably a chaos pagan. That's probably the way I'd put it. That chaos magic probably gave me a kind of a lexicon or a key to what maybe the magic of our pagan ancestors was. It was less ceremonial because it was pre-Abrahamic, but it was more kind of theatrical and active,
Hmm.
if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think so. At least just on the surface. I'm curious, how would you define what makes chaos magic that, and how does that distinguish itself from um, the ceremonial aspect that you're talking about?
Well, my own theory on chaos magic and modern forms of magic is simply because there's more energy available today than there was in Victorian times. So, for instance, like everything has a potential. Everything from that TV behind you to the bookshelf with the books on it to you might have everything. You look at the room that you're in now, right? Now you compare that to how someone lived in Victorian times, where they might have had candlelight, maybe gaslight, dimly lit. As for instance, so the need to generate energy was much
Mm,
more difficult. So it was built up through ceremonial magic. So built up through the concept of ritual. So you'd have these complex Golden Dawn or OTO type rituals that coming out of Germany, which were complex, ceremonial, ritualistic, and theatrical, involving all the costumes and everything, because they were trying to attain energy. Well, now energy is everywhere. You can go to you can go see a band in a stadium with 20,000 people. The site, the charge is ferocious. You can do things that I used to do, like go on a roller coaster or some kind of like terrifying fairground and hold the sigil in front of me. And as the thing was going over the top and everyone was screaming, you can actually concentrate all that psychic energy into the sigil. You can go on, you can take an airplane, go, like, I'll give you an example, right? I learned how to use airplanes as magic wands. I know that sounds weird, but when an aircraft is taken off, it's filled with tremendous amounts of psychic energy, not only from the power of the plane taking off and everything else, but also the wishes and desires and the feelings of the people on board. It creates a phenomenal sense of power. And there's always a risk of death. There's always that unprevailing risk that this plane is going to go down. Well, that's actually you can actually concentrate that energy into a sigil as the plane is taking off, or something similar. Now, so that's you've got all that energy that wasn't available in Victorian times. So, and also because of the genteel nature of, say, Victorian times, it wouldn't have had the ceremonial intensity of our pagan ancestors, who would have lit bonfires and screamed and shouted and painted their faces and banged drums and created the energy
mm.
this way. If you're like living it, if you're a Victorian gentleman in Boston or London or Berlin or whatever, you don't have that. It's not part of your culture. So the ceremonial nature is that. So basically, chaos became a means to tap into the super and hyper abundance of energy that we've had since, say, World War II, and tap into that. And that's why, the ability to capitalize and tap on this enormous amounts of energy that we have, and to just, without having to actually do all the work to get it. It's there. You can pick it like fruit from a tree.
That's so interesting. And it seems like you're talking about essentially the psychic energy is the most powerful to tap into. So it seems like what you're saying is that the best source of energy is psychic energy, and specifically almost like emotional energy. Um, is there, so would you say that you can do magic without it, but that's like the best way or the most potent way to do that?
Well, I don't actually know how it functions. Like, there has to be an interface force between your desire and the outcome, your will and the outcome. Now, that interface force is, it is obviously rooted in the mysteries of the universe. And in my book, Sorcery, The Invocation of Strangers, I theorized it was probably dark matter energy, what they call dark matter energy, or there's some form of energy that hasn't been derived yet. So you have on one side here, you have the will, and it's pushing, right? And it's creating a shunting effect. And on the other end, it's affecting the outcome. So this shunting effect has an unseen force between desire and manifestation. And that unseen force, I theorize, considering what we know about physics at the moment, and in quantum physics and so on, it's possibly be what they call dark matter energy, that mysterious force that holds, like, 90% of the universe together, but they can't actually find it. So that buffering force, that not the buffering force, that shunting force, It's the ability to actually move that is what happens. So you can have all the will, all the desire, all the intention, and fired up in your brain. But you have, this is the artistic part of it. You have to effectively use it, attenuate your nervous system. See, the nervous system is the key element of your physiology and all this. This is why you can do magic if you're disabled, if you're, regardless of your age. If you have, if your nervous system is primed towards this, you will find that it becomes much more effective in creating that stream of psychic energy towards manifesting your intention. The nervous system is actually a very I think like Jack Parsons was one of the first people to actually, just talk about the key strategic element of the nervous system in the outcome of magic. And he's absolutely right. I mean, in recent times, you hear this being brought into things like sex magic and stuff like that, but that's only an easy way of doing it. There's the actual nervous system, and when I say attenuating, it's blocking out all extraneous or interfering frequencies down to a state of pure focus. Now, when you have that state of pure focus, you've literally got the ability to really move that shunting thing. Now, you can build up that psychic state whatever way suits you, fine. You can build it up through, in the ancient times, they would talk about warriors building themselves up in pagan times, like in Celtic mythology, the warriors building themselves up into an enormous state of battle rage. Now, that battle rage was actually the symbolism was like the goddess, the Morrigan, but it was that transfer. They had the sigil was the concentration on the Morrigan, and that battle rage was very similar to what the berserkers would have used. In fact, there's a phenomenal record of a battle between the Irish and the Vikings in the late Middle Ages, and the monk that wrote the thing down spoke about the Morrigan on one side and the Valkyries in the sky fighting while the battle on the battlefield went below. Now, it's an allegory; they didn't actually appear in the sky, but there was there's this sort of like visual sigilization of the focus was the battle rage. Now that's it. They had a pure stream of energy. They would concentrate on the Morrigan, to block out everything in their world, and then go into battle. So that's the same thing. You must find a way to attenuate your nervous system down to the absolute focus. And there's lots of ways of doing it, but the thing is to block out anything else. To block out anything else, very difficult to do. And so you have a one direct focus on that thing. But by God, when you get it done, it's intense. Now, I'll give you an example of how it happened to me accidentally as a kid. I, like most kids, read books and listened to radios under the covers at night with a flashlight. And we've all done it. And I don't know how old I was. I wasn't that young. I was probably, I just, even when I was older, like in my mid-teens, I still like reading under the covers. There was something that concentrative about it, And also I used to listen to the radio on headphones, old-fashioned headphones. This is back in the 80s now, and early 80s now, late 70s. So like I would have the headphones on here under the covers. Now, I had read a collection of, this is amazing when I think about it. I was reading a collection of H.P. Lovecraft short stories, and in the dark with a flashlight. And I was actually, because I was trying to create the atmosphere. I like the theatricality of the kind of whole reading. And, when I throw myself into reading something, I'm absolutely focused completely on it. And if I'm enjoying it or enthralled by it, it's intense. It's almost orgasmic when I'm reading something that I'm completely captivated by. And so I was in that kind of state. These stories are fantastic, blah, 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 blah. And then I put on the radio, and we used to have a bandwidth in Europe called LW, long wave. We had FM, medium wave, and long wave was used to transmit signals across Europe. So I used to just like lying in bed in the dark, tuning in stations from all across Europe. And you'd hear like, Berlin, Moscow, and all the different languages, Madrid, and that kind of thing. And then when you hear this one, I was between stations. And suddenly I hear an American accent going, Rhode Island's #1 Buick dealer, uh, route blah, 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 Providence. Now, I didn't know what a Buick was, and I didn't know where Rhode Island was until I realized a few minutes later that that's where Lovecraft was from. And somehow my psychic energy had either traveled across the Atlantic using that radio, and that's also what got me very interested in electronics and magic, across the Atlantic, and met that signal somewhere outside the Outer Banks past Cape Cod. But it got into my little Philips transistor radio. And that was a classic example of that shunting effect. And then years later, in 2019, I went to Necronomicon. It just, it was just weird, and and I didn't even know what a Buick was. I didn't even know. And what the hell is a Buick? What is that? What is he selling? I didn't realize it was a car. But that was absolutely a phenomenal moment in my teens of like, well, this reality is a whole different thing altogether.
Yeah, it seems like you shouldn't have even been able to pick up a signal from where you were. Like that doesn't
No,
seem
no, no,
logistically possible.
no, because they can't get around the curvature of the Earth, so they basically get out. They would have left but like, how many hundreds of stations are on the East Coast of the United States? And I had to be one in Rhode Island while I was reading from Providence the night I was reading a book by H.P. Lovecraft. So that was
Yeah.
just astounding in itself.
Yeah, that's a trip. And it sounds like there's almost like this meditative quality to what you're describing, because that's the similar practice when you're talking about meditation, is like kind of blocking everything out and just focusing on one thing, say like your breath or something, and pouring all of your focus into that one thing. So maybe, it's kind of works the other way in terms of like there's a meditative aspect to magic, like you're incorporating that same kind of practice into it.
Absolutely. There's a loaded term meditative. It kind of like brings you to like, kind of hippie-ish meditation.
Yeah.
The word has a far, like I said, the meaning that the design of the meaning that you're putting to it is very much more accurate in that meditative force could be something looking like a candle flame. That meditative force could be
A sigil.
yeah, or even I know someone who had tremendous success uh, having water dripping from a leak in the ceiling of a garage, an outbuilding that he had in his house, and he found that he let the water drop into his mouth, and he said within no time he'd enter in this hyper magical state. Now, when you're in this magical state, you're aware of it. It's there. It's like it's just transcendental. When you get to that state, and reality just becomes bizarre. I mean, I can remember one time walking along a country road that took me like hours to get down it from a long hike. And then I got back in like a third or a fifth of the time, even though it's the same distance traveled. I had just become so focused on the tree lined road for miles and miles and miles that it actually changed me. It actually changed. I've had that on a bicycle. I mean, I've had that I've had that experience of traveling in that, and then suddenly falling out of this reality. And then you realize that you can actually fold the thing down to help you. So, I mean, I think that happens a lot. It's this thing that like when you travel somewhere, someone say you go for a walk and they say it seems to take ages to get there, but they say, and when you're coming back, it's much shorter. And then
Yeah.
people say, well, that's because you already know the route. No, you don't know the route because you're coming in a different direction. There's something happened in your consciousness when you reach the other end that you achieve the objective of the journey, that when you turn around and come back, there's a sort of like you're psychically going downhill. And as a result, the actual time speed, because the clock speed of the brain actually changes. So the experience happens much quicker.
Wow. Yes, this is it's very fascinating. Hey guys, hope you're enjoying the episode so far. I just want to take a quick moment to offer you a special gift. It's the free initiation package download. This is a free download package that includes the Toolbox mini course. I created this package to equip you with all of the essential tools you need for any type of energetic or magical practice for anyone serious about their spiritual development. It's comprised of 3 parts: the circle, the breath, and the voice, where you'll learn how to cast the Circle of the Magi, various breathwork techniques, including a powerful guided breathwork meditation, rune galler, and more. You'll also get access to the Inner Sanctum, our private Facebook group and Discord server, as well as some Wizard Factory wallpapers for desktop and mobile, all for free. And for those who've already seen this course, I'm happy to announce that this is a brand new remake with better production and even more information. You can find the link to get yours in the description below. So check it out and let's get back to the content. So then what would you say are the fundamentals of a spell? Like if you kind of look at it agnostic, like from the medium perspective, and just say no matter what medium you're working with, what are those fundamental components of a spell?
Clarity of objective. That is where most people go completely wrong, is that they focus on vague ideas of what they want. You must have absolute clarity of focus. And in fact, I think that's a big part of the old ritual magic, is that it was to help that clarity of focus towards the objective. So therefore, you know exactly what you want or what you need or what you want to do. And you calculate and calibrate all the possible things that might go wrong. Very important. A lot of people, when their spells or their sigils or their intention or manifest go wrong, it's because they didn't factor in the things
Unforeseen variables.
Yeah. You've got to actually concentrate, and that's all. That's it. It's like a battle plan almost, and it's really you have to spend time really thinking about it and thinking about, like, if it doesn't work, what could be the consequences? Am I interrupting in someone else's destiny? Am I affecting them people indirectly? They don't mean that to do it. This kind of thing. It's like the whole, the greatest, buffer that I ever encountered regarding hexing someone out of revenge is that they said that it's when I'm reading, like, and I'm still finding in books that it creates hereditary hexes, that the kids who did nothing to you will actually can actually get that hex. So it might not hit the father or the mother that you're after, but it'll go after the kids, and it could go down the generations. And that was when I first read that, I was like, I never want to do that. The concept of some asshole at work and I want to do something to him, and then you find out, well, he's got a 3-year-old daughter, and I'm okay, I'm not going to do it. That's actually, it's not so much, that's kind of like a powerful moral, factor in that. This is why hysterical and unhinged people are destroyed by magic, because they often hex people or spell people with revenge and things like this that are often unwarranted, or else they publicly announce them. Everything, it almost must be kept secret. It doesn't leave here, and it backfires. It becomes like you're throwing a grenade at somebody, but you're still standing beside them in a magical grenade, and it affects them. It can often affect them worse, and I mean, I've seen it firsthand. I've seen horrific consequences of somebody, hexing their ex-husband or ex-wife, and it immediately, resulting in horrific things. And so, so the thing is, like, you should never. And my bottom line is, I would never hex someone. Unless it was completely, I'd be even afraid of their pets getting damaged, that kind of thing. So my attitude is, I developed this concept years ago of no contact ever again. It's just leave. And actually, that actually became quite a powerful magical tool, because by going no contact ever again, it again attenuated my focus down. It limited the focus, trimmed the focus down away from that problem. There's a tremendous power in that, in walking away from a bad situation.
It's the original block button.
yeah, and it is, and and the funny thing is, in a funny kind of way, it is a magical process because you're kind of like working on yourself.
Hmm.
Like as what Crowley said. Any magical process that isn't uniquely concerned with the development of the self is black magic. Wow, is there a lot of truth to that? There really is.
Mm.
So the fundamentals of a spell, yeah, do your groundwork, do your homework, make sure you've considered all the possibilities of what could go right and what could go wrong. Do it for honorable and noble and righteous purposes. Don't do it out of revenge. Don't do it out of greed. Don't do it out of to screw someone over. Don't do if you yeah. The bottom line would be is make sure you're worthy of the outcome before you work your
Mm.
attention towards it. And you say, am I worthy of the manifestation, and am I able to, what's the word, validate the trajectory and the outcome? And then you'll say to yourself, something, if I do get that job, maybe I'll be shit at it. Maybe I won't.
Yeah, that's
That's it.
that to me kind of strikes me as like the difference between magic and prayer, because to me prayer is very like that entitled mindset of praying for things that you're not worthy of. You just want, selfishly, and you're
It's
praying for
welfare.
Sky Daddy to give it to you.
Yeah, well, that's why pagans have sacrifice and Christians have,
Exactly.
the pagans have much more. We give up something.
It's the law
We
of Gabo.
sacrifice. Yeah, we do not. We're not in. We don't do spiritual welfare. That's why
Yeah,
prayers are never answered. They're not. They're rarely answered. And and that's why sacrifice is the only thing that works in that
right.
regard.
And that's why the Jesus story doesn't work, because that's the ultimate spiritual welfare.
Yeah, but even the whole thing of like, you play by their rules and you end up in space kibbutz at the end. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's just a ridiculous concept. There's no sense of your destiny beyond obeying the rules.
Obedience. There's no
Yeah,
growth. Yeah.
no, and there's also no sense of loyalty to the planet. This is why all these Abrahamic mindsets are like, we're going to destroy this planet, but let's all go to Mars. If we were pagans, we wouldn't do that, because we ultimately all pagans. I mean, Indo-Europeans anyway, and you believe in the concept of reincarnation or recurrence. That you will come back in either in this life over again, or you will come back in a different life. But this puts an onus on you to actually protect the here and now, because you're going to come back to this thing.
Right. You're tethered to the outcome, and
Exactly.
you don't see yourself separate from nature. That's another thing, is you see the interconnectedness of things.
Yeah, yeah. Steve, and you've got you've got a responsibility for stewardship.
Precisely.
You know, you don't cut down forests, you plant forests, because you're going to need them in the future, or you're going to need them in another life, or someone else will.
For other generations. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you were going up into the clouds to play a harp,
What do you need a planet for? Yeah,
well,
exactly.
why do you even care about this place? It's gone.
Right. So when it comes to the anatomy of a spell, you've got your intentions, your clarity, your outcome. You're considering the variables in terms of like planning your strategy and everything.
Yeah,
And then we've covered kind of the ethics of it, like what boundaries to not cross and that. But then when it comes to the actual application and bringing that forth, what would you say is like the main components there, regardless of the
you,
medium?
you mean like the actual paraphernalia, the infrastructure of the actual thing? Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if I have any here to show you, but I create I create magical books. I create. I don't have one here with me now. I create. The concept of cut-ups, where you take words, you write them out on a piece of paper, and you chop them all up, and then you rearrange them. And I've basically do that on a kind of an industrial level. I have a video somewhere how to do magic in the modern age, and I create like picture books of pictures and images, and I work with the unfoldment as it's coming along. See, it's not abracadabra instant result. It's about modifying. I'm not that powerful because I can't instantaneously change the subatomic nature of the universe
Mm.
in an instant.
It's almost like you're putting a signal out, like a beacon,
Yeah,
and then just kind of like it's just coming out in waves. And over time, somebody,
yeah.
the universe starts to pick up on that.
Or you move onto a piece of land, and the first thing you do is you take all the stones out. You build boundary walls with the stones. Then you put fertilizer into the land. You till the land. You make sure it's ready for the crop, and then you plant the crop. It's the same thing. It's
Hmm.
like, and then you eventually hope to harvest it, and that's exactly how it is. It's not this like 1, 2, 3, bam, I'm in there. It's a nurturing of an intention from source to manifestation. And I, uh, I mean, people always tell them, observation is key to everything. I'll tell you how it works. You, you get real time data in things like synchronicities. Okay. You will notice that things will happen with an unnatural frequency. You see, what you're doing here is you cannot really get the outcome of your desire until you reach a magical state. And that magical state is nurtured by your observation of the world around you. So you will notice synchronicities. These are very powerful. Like, I don't know, it happens to me all the fucking time, but it's basically, I've been living in the state now for decades where if I've set my mind towards something, just to get something done, anything, and I put my mind towards it, and I'm jotting down in a book, I'm writing down in a book, and then maybe maybe I take a train somewhere, right? And this train stops at a platform in the middle of the countryside, and there is somebody who looks exactly like, or dressed in a certain color, or is identical to what I'm actually thinking about at the moment, or a poster for a movie or something. And you say, okay, that's interesting, but it might be a coincidence. But then it starts happening in other ways. And then you know that what's happening here is the subatomic fabric of the universe is starting to get flexible around you. You're not constrained by the underlying quantum tightness.
Mm.
So the synchronicity is a way of it showing you that you're now you're like you've taken the clay and you've taken the flour, you've added water to it, and now it's dough, it's malleable. Okay, so when you recognize these synchronicities, just they start happening, and then you go with them. Some people are actually quite frightened by them, and then you will find that then you will get to what you want, whether it's the right job, or to move to a certain city, or to actually move to another country. You will find that these little processes, so out of nowhere, someone might come along and say, you don't know, and you'll say, oh, I know somebody who can get that thing for you that you need to do the thing. And this never existed before. It falls into you. It's almost like you're collapsing the inhibitors around you, and these
Mm.
things are falling into you.
It's
And
attraction.
yes, and as you see these synchronicities, now you can go nuts. Some people see synchronicities where they don't exist. They go mad seeing numbers, and that doesn't work.
Hmm.
They have to be very specific, and it's almost disturbing how frightening, not how specific they can be. But when you start noticing, you develop almost like a kind of a psychic sense of its security. Oh, this shit is working deep down inside, right?
Mm.
And then all these inhibitors that block away all this stuff, they start collapsing. And all the things you need start coming to you. And that's how it works.
Mm. So when you see these synchronicities, do you see them more as just kind of a confirmation
Yeah.
of this, or
Yeah.
is there anything that you do when you see them, like you kind of like go into a certain visualization or something,
Well,
or
well, you get a sense of joy. You get this kind of sense of joy. And like, oh my God, fuck me, that worked, you know? And that sense of joy, that sense of satisfaction is rooted in something that's very beautiful. But it's a confirmation. Absolutely, it's a confirmation. And it also gives you encouragement to go on. It's, it gives you encouragement that you're on the right path. Now, this is where secrecy is important, because if you make this known, you you could probably develop these egregorial uh, pathological entities that will try and destroy it. You see, it's we're going into kind of more mystical, spiritual things, but there is part of the process that if you speak it out into the world or write it and or let others see it, the world of entities takes an interest in it and tries to disrupt it, either through infecting a person around you to try and disrupt it. Now, this might be not so much good and evil. It could be actually how the mechanics of the universe works, how different degrees of energy kind of struggle to survive. It could be kind of like a psychic version of the law of thermodynamics or whatever. But this is why secrecy is so important. You never tell anyone what your intention and desire is. When it happens, you can, and then you can show them your magical journals and say, "Look, and do you remember when this happened? Look, and I've done this happened to me." And then in 2008, I was wiped out financially by the economic collapse in Ireland. I was on the dole actually. I was actually collecting the dole. And I had all these plans that all the ass was torn out of them. So I started a new journal, and the first thing was I drew a rough map of all the places I wanted to visit. So I drew Ireland and I drew my sigil on it. And then I drew lines from them to these countries. Well, within 10 years, I got to every single country. And in many cases, I'd done it for free.
mm,
I've been asked to speak in conferences, and the promoters brought me over, that kind of thing. I know that happened because I put my intention into it. Instead of falling into despondency, saying everything has gone to shit, I had started planning for the future. And even if it was just a desire, but that desire alone was enough to make the actual reality flexible. And dreams are also another one. Dreams will also help you. You can have signs and symbols and dreams that can actually. So I'm a big proponent of people keeping dream journals. But yeah, I'm absolutely. It's real, but it has to begin with a pure intention. It can't be built out of spite, or it can't be built out of show off or anything like that. It was a genuine desire to improve yourself. And I mean, I visited. I ended up even obscure countries like India and Sri Lanka. I got to. It's just bizarre, and they were on the map, And so, what do you do? It was real. It's real.
it's amazing. And so it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier, just the sheer act of writing something down, right, like your intention, what the outcome you want. That's
Yeah.
like the first step. What are other kind of different mediums that one can go towards? There's like obviously we've talked about ceremonial stuff. There's using wands and there's writing things. And I know you've done lots of very creative stuff with electronics, and there's a
Yeah.
lot we could get into there.
Yeah, I've experimented a lot with electronics and stuff like that. I've tried to make, one thing I found, there's a funny expression you hear, kitchen witchery, kitchen witches.
Mhm.
Like that's kind of a new agey thing among, a certain element. Well,
Yeah.
I started laughing at that about 5 or 6 years ago. Let's see if we can do this. So I was doing things like putting sigils in bread and baking them. So, to see if that energetic force. And another one that was very successful was to put books into microwaves and blast them I'll put them on the microwave on high and have the microwaves actually charge up the book of intentions. And that one worked.
Wow.
And things like that. I was it was kind of but basically I was rediscovering folk magic just using modern technology.
Right.
So you have that in even Abrahamic religions, the preparation of bread and things like that. But yeah, I mean, so it's the ways of doing magic are only limited by your own creativity and imagination.
That's where the art part comes in. It's like
Absolutely.
you
Absolutely.
know what the fundamentals are. That's the science. It's like these are the components that you
Yeah,
have to have, but then the way that you combine those ingredients, that's completely up to your imagination.
absolutely. Yeah, you can't, the one with the microwave is the science. The
Yeah.
the book and the intention is the art. And the two together work. If you don't have a microwave, you don't have the science part. But there's other ways of doing it. Like you can go to a really intense concert and hold the thing in your hand when everyone's going nuts, or
Hmm.
when you're going
I've
nuts.
done
So
that one.
yeah, I mean the mosh pit. That I've done that when I was younger. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I used to like. I can remember like I was kind of like in the kind of the early the kind of the early kind of punk rock metal scene. It was called the New Wave of British Heavy Metal, and that was really big when I was about 17, 18. And I used to see them all wearing all these patches of bands around their. They'd
Hmm.
have like a leather jacket on top of that a denim jacket, and they'd have like Motorhead patches, Iron Maiden, Saxon, and they'd be all like going fucking nuts, right? But and I used to look at those patches and saying, can you imagine the amount of energy that's being put into those bands? And all those bands became superstars. And so it made me realize that that was a magical ritual, and the sigils were the band's patches, the fabric patches on the back,
Hmm.
and that kind of thing. I can remember this one guy, this nutcase I used to know in Dublin. His name was Judas. He was absolute. He was an interesting. He was a nut job, right? But I'm no joking. I'm telling you something. He said one day he showed me he was covered in tattoos, and he had a big TS, and I was looking at it on his chest, and I says, "Is that your way of telling me you're gay?" And he burst out laughing, and he goes, "No, it's a band called Twisted Sister." And I said, "I never heard of them, right?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's a band called Twisted Sister. They're amazing." And he'd gotten a couple of singles from an import shop in Dublin from America when they were nobodies, right? When they were only really starting out, right? In 1985, I saw a picture of him in a magazine where he's standing there with Dee Snider from Twisted Sister, and Dee Snider has his arm around him. That's magic. There's an
Hmm.
example of magic. You know what I mean? His love for that band in the early days had brought the band to him personally.
Oh, that's
You know,
crazy.
yeah. So, like I said, you're only limited by your creativity.
Yeah, and that's where, as I always say, you can intellectualize and kind of mentally masturbate to things, but until you actually start experimenting in the laboratory of reality, that's where the magic literally happens.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Otherwise, it's just theories.
You've got to get out there. I mean, no one became a professional sports player by watching the TV at home. They had to pick up the ball and get out there. It's
Right.
it's that thing. It's that thing. But if your heart is pure and you've got the talent and you're motivated by the right desires and you maintain calmness and attenuate focus down to it, next thing you know, you're playing in the World Cup or you're in the Super Bowl.
Hmm.
It happens.
So, Thomas, if people want to dive deeper into their own study and learn more about the kind of philosophy and the practical application of magic, what are some sources that you would recommend, whether it could be books, YouTube channels, whatever is useful?
Yeah, there's tons of great stuff out there, books, videos, and all kinds of things. I would say the first stage is the most important one of all is to work on yourself.
Mm.
It's just like you've got to work on yourself first. You've got to, you know, work on your own personality. That's an important one. You've got to become as true to yourself as possible. And by intent, you've got to confront your own shadow. You've got to psychoanalyze yourself. You've got to, no, we're not becoming neurotic now. You've got to pay very close attention to your dreams. That doesn't mean you should keep a dream journal, a dream diary, but you should very much do that and not be neurotic decoding the dream every single morning. Just writing them down or little drawings is enough. You don't have to analyze them. Just getting them out of that subconscious world into the material world on paper is a process that's training your consciousness to do that. Your imagination comes out. Your imagination. I mean, H.P. Lovecraft wrote letters to his friends saying, "I don't even know if the stories I write are actually true or just the phantasms of my nocturnal slumbers." There's the muse comes involved there. Your higher self is working, your subconscious mind, and that helps. And then after a while, you will feel differently. You will feel more comfortable in yourself. You will definitely know when the time is right to do this, and then you learn to create a sigil, or however you want to approach it. I find personally that communication with nature is very powerful, but also you can live in a very big, large, complex city. I used to find when I lived in New York, the kind of like the shittiness of 42nd Street was a very powerful form of energy I love to tap into. Walking around there at 2 or 3 in the morning when it was just like it might as well, it's just so many people on the streets and all these characters that the tourists were afraid of. I found fascinating, and I would find myself being put into a kind of a magical state by doing that, and this kind of thing. And then when then you're ready to do that. And I mean, I still think David Conway's book is still a great one, the Magick Ritual Primer, because it's kind of dated, but it's a very useful primer to get you going. I like that one, the David Conway book. I think of all the books on magic I've ever read to get someone started, I think that's the best one yet. And still, even though it's like it was from the early 70s, it still stands up. Remember, it's like, people are learning to play guitar these days. It's very easy. When I was growing up, it was very hard. Now you go onto YouTube and there's someone showing you this is how you play this Led Zeppelin thing, or this is how you play this U2 thing. And you say, oh shit, I didn't have that growing up. But that's robbing you of your own innovation. So if you come across a YouTube channel where someone is actually, oh, this sounds good, it looks good, copying exactly is not what you should be doing. Remember, it's the art, that's the science. The art part now is to actually add your own twist to it, to bring your own flavor into that mix. So I mean, there's everything is there. I think Philip Hines' book on condensed, I think it's called Condensed Chaos. I found it's a really good one. And so that again, I think a good way to start is to learn things like tarot was great. Even just mulling over a tarot deck and looking at it, even going to an art gallery and just falling into the imagery, and instead of saying, oh, that's just a nice painting. I can remember I used to go to the Turner, William Mallor Turner, the English artist, exhibitions in Dublin. He's been dead for over a century, but it was like they had his paintings every year. And in winter, the city was grey and dull and cold, but you could go to the National Gallery for free, and in darkness all these paintings of beautiful watercolors were all lit up, and I found that almost like psychedelic. So I used to come out of that exhibition with this sense of like a different sense of reality. It's you. You've got to actually, what you discover more about these things is who you are, and you'll become painfully aware of your limitations and your shortcomings, but you've got to go into the darkness to confront the Minotaur and slay the Minotaur in order to come out and have the power to be a king. And there's a lot of this kind of work in it. And I can't say this is exactly how you do it, because how I've done it is my own way. And I can't sit to someone and say, oh, well, explore, the ancient megaliths of Ireland and Europe, or take a deep interest in Hindu and go down to the temple like I did, and whatever, you might not have those aspects available to you. But it's always like, I think the whole thing is to work towards building a magical state to the point where you feel differently than you were before. I can't explain it, but it's ultimately it's based on your nervous system functioning more effectively with the five sense reality. That's probably how I would put it.
That's great. It's almost like magic is almost more of a state of being than a state of doing.
Oh, absolutely, it is. I mean, you know, that's that's exactly it. I mean, of course, there is work involved in it,
Hmm.
but the creativity. I mean, I was reading there about Crowley and the Rites of Elysium, where he basically invented the modern rock show. I mean, it's it's no joke when people say this guy invented everything. Yeah, it's like wherever I go in my work, oh, this bastard again, he appear him again, you know. But performing this scandalous play, the scandalous ritual in Caxton Hall in London back in 19 or whatever, and the newspapers are ragging on it. And then, but then when I more read into it, what he was doing was creating the first rock show. That the first rock show, and the newspapers going, "This is terrible." Like these corrupting our youth. This kind of thing. He was inventing what would be happening 50 years later. And that's why I'm not surprised. Like people like Bowie and Jimmy Page were fascinated by him because he created the world that they could exist in. And that's yeah, it's a state of doing. Now don't go wrong. That's the important thing. I'm working with my friend and colleague Neil MacDonald in England, and we did a film on Atlantis, and we were both very pleased that that came out. And we're now currently, and Crowley, of course, appears in that as well. And now we're doing, he's like this jester who pops up everywhere in my life. But William Butler Yeats, his rival in the Golden Dawn, his grave is only just down the road from me. It's a weird thing, but uh, the current project we're working on is on the Pendle Witches, which was a witchcraft trial that happened in the north of England in the early 1600s, and it was at the time of like the Puritans. So the same crowd who were in America at Salem and all this stuff, saw witches and devils everywhere following the King James Bible. And we're writing this book and making this film, not to say this is what happened, but we're saying it happened because magic worked. And it did work. It actually, what got them into trouble was their magic worked. That's what got them into trouble with the authorities. And researching into this, and I've been writing it, and it's becoming, and then back in that magical state again. You can see that, like, literally, officialdom was terrified of the working class and the poor having access to magic because they gave them an unfair advantage in society. They could kill a king if they wanted. And so you had all the royalty at the time getting all this magical protection while denouncing witches and witchcraft like King James. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying the reason why in these Presbyterian countries like this, where Lutheranism or Anglican countries where they were like Scotland, England, Germany, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, the reason why they were obsessed with witches is because they knew magic worked. And the prosecution of the case is all, they're poor people and they're the bottom of society. And they're admittedly, many of them are not very nice people. But I mean, they basically had their communities terrified of them because their magic worked.
Mm.
And we live in an age where magic doesn't work. It's a joke. But
Harry Potter stuff.
yeah, but they existed in a time when a dimly lit, cold world, quite different than the one where you were traveling on the lonely road at night. Even the educated believed that there were goblins behind the tree lines. That there was, the casting the evil eye upon someone. Had real repercussions. Or waking up one morning and a witch mark was on the fence post of your property, and you were terrified. And this is how they lived. And they lived this way because they knew magic worked. So, we can say, we can look at the Puritans and say, oh, this was the thing. Before I started working on this book, I had that kind of you know that song by Kate Bush called "Waking the Witch," and there's a voice playing the witch finder, and he's going confess, and you have this concept of a bug-eyed, uh, Puritan crazy guy who's like out to burn witches with a crucifix in his hand. In reality, it was nothing like that. They were like, civil servants and bureaucrats. Let's see, she's a witch. Let's find out how she's a witch. Could you please put your finger on the body that to the person we think you hexed? And if they bleed, that'll be used against you in court. It's in the rule books. It was all very bureaucratic and cold, but yet they were talking about magic. Why? Because they knew it existed and they knew it was real.
Hmm. And it seems like the further you go back in time where science was not as prolific, you could, there's like an inverse correlation of less science and more imagination.
Yeah,
And
it
that
really happened.
imagination.
Imagination, yeah, and it really happened with the Protestant Enlightenment. The Protestant Enlightenment should really be, it's an unfair term, it should be really called the Freemasonic Enlightenment, because when you start looking at it, it's Protestant because all these guys were in Freemasonic lodges, and the Catholics were on the Jesuits, and that's really what it's about. But okay, let's go take it back to the beginning. Hunting magic, the cave art. What did it show? It showed the fellas in the tribe hunting a buffalo. So they sat there in the deepest cave with some lights, and they painted the buffalo, and there's us there, and we're going to go after them. There might be a guy banging a drum. And guess what? It worked. In fact, we probably exist today in a modern civilization because of magic. In fact, we do.
Mm,
Because as soon as fire was discovered, what was the first thing they did after they learned how to cook their food and keep warm? Magic.
wow.
Yeah.
That's profound. So magic was an integral part of our evolution and our survival as well.
Absolutely. I don't think we'd be here because it's the ultimate creative force. And hunting magic of our Paleolithic ancestors and Neolithic ancestors is the reason why the humans were actually able to take, even since the beginning of Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, the proto-human realizes that the bone can be used as a weapon,
Mhm.
and they defeat the other group of proto-humans, and at the end, he throws the bone up and it turns into a spaceship. I mean, that is, Kubrick was showing us all that's where the start of getting into space came from. When man first picked that early man picked that made that first tool or weapon.
Yes.
And it wasn't a bone on the ground, it was something that had potential.
Right.
Ultimately a wand in many ways. Yeah.
True. True. Yeah. I've contemplated a lot the significance of tools and what is even a tool. Really anything can be a tool. And as there's like a tool, what is its intended purpose or how can it be abused? And like a weapon is a tool, but a tool can be a weapon. And like there's that interplay there. Tools are absolutely fundamental to understanding like the way we interact with the world because it's the stair step as well of our evolution. And as we continue progressing, uh, if you keep using the old tools and not continuing to advance, those things that were propelling you forward then start to actually hinder you and hold you back by being archaic and stagnant.
Well, what you're describing just then is exactly how to get into the magical state. You're almost have this transcendental philosophy regarding like a screwdriver, uh, and that's that's it. That this kind of dialogue inside your consciousness regarding the pros and cons of the screwdriver and what is the extraneous, external, and prevailing long term aspects of using it in a certain way or not using it in a certain way. You're building that magical state inside you because that's where it begins. That's the seed. That's it because you've contemplated something beyond, and then you'll find that you see it beyond its potential. That kind of thing.
Mm.
So it's that's it. That's exactly it. I mean, I was blessed from a very early age that I find everything interesting. I've never been bored in my life. Everything enchants me. I love traveling, even if it's to another part of Ireland I've never been to. I was just as joyous as if I was traveling to Japan or somewhere. And I hope I never lose that, because that's been really helpful to me. It's beyond curiosity. It's wonderment, which is a kind of a magical
And
phrase anyway. So
it's like that childlike, you
never
know,
lose it. Yeah.
yeah,
And that's what the education system destroys it. It just
for sure.
absolutely destroys it. It does. And you know, and that's, yeah, exactly, wonderment. It's true. And that's, again, you can't sit down tomorrow and say, I'm going to do this. You have to build yourself up into it. And that's a big part of it, this concept of, like, almost kind of developing a kind of transcendental philosophy inside yourself. Because you're working on yourself, aren't you?
Hmm. Yeah, it's almost like you're carving some kind of image, and it's not something that just happens. Each little piece that you're cutting away is working towards that end,
Yeah. And another
and you're
powerful
shaping
aspect,
it.
exactly. And another powerful one is satire and laughter and comedy.
Mm.
Crowley actually was the one who, that's what the chaos magic thing was, very heavily into that. But we had Jestercraft in the past and stuff like that.
It's like
But Crowley
alchemy.
said, yeah, exactly. Well, Crowley said that the biggest hindrance in the magical tradition up until the 20th century was the one missing element was humor and having fun. This is why he loved the things like the cinema. He loved the Marx Brothers. In fact, the original design for the Fool card in the top tarot deck was going to be Harpo Marx. And that was his original plan. He told Lady Farida Harris, I want the Fool to be Harpo from the Marx Brothers. He understood the power of satire, extremely powerful, because satire creates a false reality, and it also creates, and it's another one too, it encourages the understanding of the world in metaphor and allegory.
Mm.
Powerful stuff.
That's everything
Because
right there.
this is a heavy part of attenuating the nervous system, because when you can
Mm.
take something and create an allegory or a metaphor of it, you own it. It's yours. You own it. You've actually taken it. And so if you come up with a unique allegory or metaphor, and humor and satire is fantastic for this.
Meme magic.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, years
Perfect.
ago on the internet, on Usenet, we still had a civil war going on in Ireland, and they used to get these, like, guys from different, like the IRA and the UVF and stuff, on Usenet, or fellows who supported them, and they were saying, it's heavy political debate, and I used to get in there and take the piss out of both of them, this kind of thing, and geez, it was good thing they didn't know who I was, because some of them, but these guys were eventually laughing at all the things I was saying, and it was just weird. Suddenly the tension was broken down, and it was less hostile and less angry, this kind of thing, and it changed everything. And years later, I met one of them and he emailed me and found me years later. And he said to me, he says, what you did back then was actually pretty powerful. You understand, like, you actually took people who were quite angry, quite politically motivated, and even sectarian in terms of religion and stuff like that, and you stopped them and made them laugh. And I said, well, yeah, I was kind of hoping to do that. See, what happened was I created a third republic in Ireland that was ruled by teddy bears. And there was like suicide bomber teddy bears and stuff like this. And I used to write these complex stories that were absolutely outrageous, about, honey trapped teddy bears and stuff like that. And I used to take it all. And they had an air force and everything, and they had like tanks. And they were just farcical stories, this kind of thing. And they were holding some IRA guy hostage. And I mean, I'd love to find them, dig them all up, but they were absolutely fucking hilarious. So I'd be sitting
Sounds
there
great.
pissing myself laughing, because this, and I wrote a constitution, a Republican constitution, and stuff like that for this new republic, and I used to do things like, declare war on a TV show that I didn't like, this kind of thing, and people are banned, and then I would, I'd put up a list of ultimatums that they must not record this on the next album, or else they will be dealt with severely. And people used to be roaring laughing. They would tell me reading this stuff, and that was a great thing. It was the chaos magic thing. It was the Jestercraft. It was, and I'm still like that today on the internet. You see me on like social media. I've never changed, and I never will change, because
Yeah.
that's a great pacifier in moments of tension. A joke,
Absolutely.
that's why you have black humor in the military and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
those fellas in the heat of battle will start telling funny jokes and stuff like that. And that's a kind of magic thing in itself.
Yeah, I see that as really a very fundamental aspect of paganism as far as I'm concerned, because and that's why mythology is so powerful, because it taps into building that perspective where everything is allegorical. It can be, the most simple mundane things can be allegorical, and that is kind of like that magical state that you were talking about, when you can start seeing the world that way, in that wonderment, and
Yeah,
then with, of course, with humor, that it's like it's kind of poking at the edges of reality and exposing the absurdity of it all, and like you
and,
said,
and you're
creating
taking
that.
you're taking control of forces that would otherwise be very powerful, and they're not owning you. The meme magic thing is remarkable in that sense. Like you could have like some shitlord in Detroit or some 18-year-old kid comes up with a meme that like absolutely rips the piss out of a politician in an extremely funny way. Who now has the power?
Mm,
Who now owns who? Well, that 18-year-old kid in Detroit, not the politician with all this power. And that is this that if that I mean, I always point to memes to people to show people like there's an example of chaos magic that works. And then we had the whole phenomenon, the Keck thing in 2016, where it took on a life of its own. And these like misfits on the internet were actually basically ruling America for for a short period of time.
yeah, yeah, it's just so antithetical to the power control system that's in place. It needs to be feared, and no, this is super serious and bad things are going to happen. And it's like somebody just comes up and yanks their pants down and everybody just loses their shit. It totally takes that power away.
Yeah, big time. It's so important. It's so important. This is why the European Union attempted to ban memes using copyright laws. The
Mm-hmm.
politicians immediately were hating them, and the bureaucrats, because they knew it's true that certain people just can't do it, and the reason is because they're not relaxed enough yet. There used to be a thing that the left in the past, the left had all the comedy and had all the best comedians and stuff. My God, has that flipped the way around the other way now? The left is completely humorless now,
Right.
and that's a magic that they've lost. That's a magical force that they've lost, and they know it too. They know it. This is why they have. I always think it. I used to think that Donald Trump used to make those tweets on Twitter just to terrorize people, and I could have
Mm-hmm.
seen it in the Oval Office going, "Will I send it?" Yeah, yeah. But he hits Twitter, knowing that there'll be a million neurotics on the other end freaking out and that's all energy coming to him.
Mm-hmm. I think
No,
that's a big part of his success, was just rallying people that just literally love to see triggered liberals, and like they loved that he could push their buttons, and like made them love him even more.
and all they had to do was ignore him, so they were bewitched and spellbound by him. That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
All they had to do to defeat that was ignore him, get on with your life. I can remember, like, I was coming back to Ireland while it was in the middle of his, 2019, I think it was. I was in Boston, Logan Airport. There you go, synchronicity. And I was sitting there, and there was this woman beside me. She was probably in her early 30s, late 20s. And she was talking to another woman there, and she was obviously well off. This woman had money because she ordered something really expensive from the menu and was knocking back really expensive mixed drinks. And all she could talk about was how oppressed she was by Trump. And I'm like, bitch, you don't even know what oppression is. You've obviously got one. You're probably in the top 0.1% of privileged people on this planet, and here you are acting like you're a woman walking 5 miles to collect water in Eritrea or somewhere like that, and bring it back on a pot. You know, and it just was. I was just watching, and I was saying, that's all in her mind.
Yeah.
She's sex. She should be really enjoying her life with all the privilege and all the opportunity she
Abundance.
has.
Yeah.
And and it's not Trump that's hexing her. She's hexing herself.
Mm,
All she has to do is ignore him.
absolutely.
All she has to do is ignore him.
Right. So to wrap this up here, Thomas, go ahead and share what you working on. You know, what irons you have in the fire at the moment.
Well, I'm working on a book and a film about the Pendle witch trials, which will be the first time the Pendle witch story has been covered by people who know that magic works. So that'll be quite unique, you know, and I'm absolutely loving it. I've never written a book in this style before, like a historical bio, and then I've just been, I'm literally been living in the 16th century in the north of England. I've just fallen into everything. I want to know what kind of foods they ate, how they cooked, what kind of clothes they wore. I just fell over it, and we just finished. We've not too long ago. We made a film on Atlantis, which I absolutely was very happy with how it came out, on a book. And that's so it's a Pendle thing at the moment. That's basically it. I want to explore, and is at a dark level, the egregorial, demonic, Lovecraftian horror of the last 3 years, and the lockdown and the
Mm.
Rona and everything connected to it. I still believe that that's a an open book that needs more work and understanding. But I think that you know, for you know yourself, I've been talking about this before. Since early 2020, the human race is placed into a spiritual battle, and I want to fully understand that so we can get out the other side. And I, against all my will, I have come to the conclusion that it's as supernatural as anything. There's something happening. So watch that space. I will be doing a talk in England soon on it, and I'll also be putting it on my Beyond Room 313 channel. You should check that out. That's basically where a lot of I do daily vlogs from the car in my Thomas Sheridan 2 channel. But sort of like from what we're talking about on this show, you'll find the videos on BR313 and the stuff on Hinduism, Magic, everything on there. You know, there's a couple of documentaries on Magic I've made that are actually on there. So that's probably the Beyond Room 313 channel. And I mean, and then the Pendle Witch book and film should be out after Christmas, probably around February, we're aiming for. And that's I'm loving learning the craft of filmmaking. I'm really enjoying that, and you know that's been a great joy to me in recent times to actually apply artistic things towards filmmaking and then try and play with the magical elements of that if I can. And so, you know, it's just like I'm just enjoying myself and, you know, watching the world go through the Kali Yuga or the current Ragnarok and waiting for the second Renaissance. And that's basically where I am now.
That sounds awesome. I really can't wait to see some of the things you mentioned that you're working on to come out. And before I ask, you know, I'll let you kind of plug your platforms and whatnot. I want to finish by asking, what's the impact that you want to leave on the world? What do you want to be remembered as?
Someone who basically allowed people to find life more tolerable, whether it be avoiding psychopathic individuals in the workplace, whether it be learning to explore themselves creatively, whether they to discover the ancient ruins of the world and what they really tell us about the human story, and uh, pissing themselves laughing from something, a joke or some funny story I made up. If that happens, I'm happy. That's all. And you know, that's basically it. If I can, I want, you know, I'd like to leave a situation where more people are smiling than, you know, but I also want people to go, that prick as well. I do want that also, because I don't want to be, you know, I do want both sides of it.
Yeah,
But
an endearing prick.
yeah, an endearing prick. I want that too. And so, but I don't want like a sainted image or anything like that. You know, I don't know. I guess that's, you know, I mean, you know, I'm not bullshitting when I say that everything I do has been to make life better for people. And I'm not just saying that as a kind of like I'm a wonderful person, But it gives me a tremendous satisfaction as a person when someone says, I was in a really bad mood today, and you wrote a funny story on Facebook, and it just like, or you made a fun, you did some funny impressions in your videos, and it just like, I just totally turned it around. Well, if I can continue doing that between now and whenever I come back in the next life, that'll keep me happy.
Love that answer, man. So tell the people where they can find you.
Well, on YouTube, it's Beyond Room 313 for the documentaries and films. That's kind of my respectable channel. For just ranting and the arsing around and commentaries, that's Thomas Sheridan 2, like Roman numerals, on YouTube. And I've got a Substack page. So you just go into Substack and type Thomas Sheridan, you'll find me. And then I appear now and again and sometimes vanish from social media. I'm kind of like, a guerrilla social media person who jumps in, causes chaos, and then jumps out.
Yeah.
So, that's you put the bat signal up, I'll come. That kind of thing.
Right on. Well, Thomas, it's been a pleasure. I hope everyone has enjoyed this episode as much as I've enjoyed this conversation. Do let us know in the comments what you thought. Give your thoughts and your feedback or any questions you might have. Those links for Thomas's pages will be down in the description below. Do give this man a follow. He does excellent work, whether it's entertainment or making you think or just ponder the deeper things in life. It's all there for you. So again, thank you so much for watching. Do like and subscribe the video, please, and we'll see you in the next video. But until next time, be empowered, inspired, and encouraged.